We are going to talk about who is my D&D character. So this is my sort of homage to a guy over how to be a great GM. Just a little nice, like, sort of send off for his channel, and about taking things that I learned from his channel and finish that circle. Take something that I learned from somebody in the community. I made some changes to it. I have my own sort of set thing now, and now I share it to you. So hopefully you can take it, you'll find stuff out of it that you really like, and you can share it on. For whoever's down the line, we all come together to improve the hobby as a whole. So let's jump into it. So, who is my D&D character? You're making a new character, character creation, you want to kind of understand insight as to who they are, which I find extremely helpful, so that way when I get to the table I have like some idea of who this character is, rather than just a whole bunch of numbers on a character sheet. I think Guy originally has like 6 questions. He had a video about it from I don't know how many years ago, but it was the one thing for me was the deepest root, or the thing that maybe turned me on the most to his channel at the time. So who is my D&D character? So I just built it out chronologically. You know, what was life like as a child? What location were you born and grew up in, and where is that in proximity to the starting area? Does it start in your hometown? Are you kind of from the area? Are you from the same nation or kingdom? Are you from the other side of the world? Are you from a different planet or a different plane of existence? Which should inform sort of how much you know about the local area, which can be really helpful, as well as, you know, people you might know, history you might know, cultural and social norms, things like that. A traveler from far across the sea, you might not know the local customs. Maybe you bow instead of shaking hands, so somebody reaches out their hand to you and you're like, I don't know what you're doing, and all those sorts of things that sometimes we see characters in other media deal with when they are outsiders, and they can have that outsider perspective on what's going on. Or you're a local and you're like, look, I know the Smith, we grew up together, and I know everything about his family and his children and all that stuff. Same way we talk about, you know, who is your family? Parents and guardians, siblings, cousins, big family, small family, only child, raised by grandparents, raised by parents, dead parents, orphan. All these are totally different decisions you can make about your character and sort of the background. Those decisions you make will sort of interpret the lens in which your character views the world. Going right next into socioeconomic caste and friendships is the lens in which they view the world. So understanding those elements about the character can give you a lot of insight as to how they see and interact with the world. And then also adding things like important childhood events and memories. Xanathar's Guide to Everything does have a nice life events kind of table and things like that you can roll on, or you can just make stuff up, or maybe you look at your ability scores and be like, oh, well, I've got a really low constitution score, so maybe I was a sickly child. You can use those to inform how your character views the world. How do they think about when they see other sick children? When they see sick children, does that sort of pull at their heartstrings? Do they have that sort of empathy for it that make them more likely? Are they more focused on being a healer, or making sure that they always carry around the spare healing potion or periaptive health or something like that? Are they somebody who takes vitamins and herbal teas, ensure that they always stay healthy because they know what it's like to be really, really sick? And then what was it like growing up? So when you moved from being a child to being sort of somebody who's training to get into the workforce, this is when you start looking at your background and you start thinking about, okay, as I was coming of age, moving out of a child into sort of those teenage years, and you take a look at that and be like, okay, what was that like for you? Did you apprentice? If this is classic like guild style apprenticeship where you actually just go live with somebody else, maybe you weren't treated very well by your master, or maybe you were. Did they work you really hard? Did they teach you anything? Maybe they just wanted the money and they didn't really teach you anything. Thinking about coming of age stuff is like, well, did your character have their first kiss, their first girlfriend or boyfriend? Thinking about those sort of things. Was there a rite of passage, some sort of coming of age ceremony, like bar mitzvah kind of thing? Did they have something like that? Was it a family thing? Was it like an official community thing? Was it anything at all? Was it maybe sort of just a small cake, or maybe you got an embroidered handkerchief, or who knows? And what did that mean for you, crossing that threshold between being a child and being an adult? So those are the sort of things that can really, really get your brain to start to percolate about, okay, this really informs sort of how they feel the world, how they think about their background and the skills they've learned and the traits they have from that. Do they view that favorably? Do they hate it and they never want to go back to it? How does that inform maybe how they deal with people with certain trades? All those sorts of things you can think about. Can be really interesting, give you a lot of sort of ammunition for your character, trying to decide who they are and how they feel about situations and how they interact with different factions and institutions and NPCs of different socioeconomic castes, of different jobs and trades, and people who work in the government or people who are farmers, and all that sort of stuff. So it's giving you an idea to basically kind of primarily think about your background at this point that you've chosen for your character and how that influences how they view the world and how they interact with it. That's what all this is going to be. It's all about how they see the world and how they interact with the world and the people who live within it. What were you doing before you became an adventurer? So you went through your coming of age, you were an adult, and then usually there's some amount of adult time that happens between where you're kind of working a job and then you become an adventurer. So what was that looking like? This can be a really fertile ground to try to think about the places your character may have gone to before they became an adventurer, things they may have picked up along the way. Again, kind of working with those background constraints, primarily in sort of like the traits, which I guess in 2024 is primarily feats that you picked up. You can start thinking about, okay, these, if I took the skilled feat and I got these 3 skills, if I kind of come up with ideas of how I was able to sort of learn those skills, being an adult in the world who was trained with this background. What job did you have? And again, using something like that life events table. So if you want to play a character that's maybe like a wizard who's getting into adventuring later in life, that classic sort of like white beard wizard, and you're like, well, this is actually just a quite senior person, so they're going to have a lot of life events. And something pretty drastic must have happened that instigated a shift from what they were doing before to being an adventurer at somebody who's sort of like at this age. Think about the things that may have happened to do that. And that leads right into the next question. Why did you leave it all behind to become an adventurer? You became an adult, you had your training, you were living life, then something happened, or a series of somethings happened, made whatever you were doing before not something you could do anymore. That was not something that you either could or wanted to do anymore. And the way that I usually try to frame this is, are you chasing after something, or are you running away from something? There was some reason you had to leave town, you had to leave the community, you can't hold down the job anymore. There's something that you did that you lost your guild membership for some reason. Like you're blackballed from the guild or barred from it, and so now you can't be a smith or a mason or whatever you were before, a scribe, whatever it was, whatever your background is. What happened there? And then you can, if you think about that, it's like, all right, let's use Leah from our solo RPG. So why did she leave it all behind? So she was an academic, she was a researcher at a university, and then she got blackballed. Like their research got defunded, and she couldn't get hired. They don't really understand, they don't know why, that everybody who was basically involved with that research was immediately blackballed and kind of cast out of the university. And they all kind of disseminated and struggled to find other jobs. So for Leah, she's not running away from something, but she is chasing after that. She wants to understand what happened. Like, why did this happen? Can I fix it? She enjoyed her life as sort of like a full-time academic in her ivory tower. So she would love to go back to that. That's what she's trained in. That's what she spent most of her life doing. But she has to figure out why their research got discredited and why she's not able to keep her position with the university. So she's chasing after something. And so that's sort of what led her to be an adventurer, because she had to find some other way to make a living, even though she's trained in this very specific thing to do. I also had some life events for her. She got sort of conscripted into a war that was happening, and she got injured in that war. She has a pretty nasty scar from it, and she's a smart cookie, so she worked in sort of like the logistics. Baggage train got attacked, and she got injured. So that's her short-term goal. Her general goal is being like, I'm trying to figure out what happened, why I can't be a researcher anymore. I'm trying to get to the bottom. Her actual short-term goal was trying to figure out who killed the librarian who had sent her the cryptic letter. Because he's dead, and she's trying to figure out why that guy's dead and why he sent her a letter. Even though it doesn't seem like it was actually from him. It seems like somebody was pretending to be him. But you have to watch the solo RPG to find out that whole story. Last thing that's kind of down here, how did you learn your class abilities? Leah started as a 0 level character, so we didn't really need to do that. But she had a bunch of Arcana sort of background skills and training, so it made it fundamentally easy that she had been working in a place where there were already lots of magic users and lots of magic items. So she's very familiar being around magic users and using magic items. So it felt really natural that she didn't have too much trouble trying to figure out how to cast spells, because her research was already so closely related to magic already and the understanding of magic that it just made sense for her to be able to pick it up. But again, I also started her off as a 0 level character, so she learns it on the fly. What is your adventuring life like? So we talked about what are the long-term goals for your character. For Leah's, for the solo RPG, hers is obviously she wants to go back to being an academic researcher. That's her passion, that's what she wants to do. So then adventuring is stressful. How does your character relax? What hobbies do they have? Do they play games? Do they like to party? What sort of vacations do they take? Hey, is your player character more of a mountain vacation person or more of a beach vacation person? Where do they like to go on vacations? Or do they want to go to like a different city and explore a different city and soak in the nightlife and do all that stuff? So trying to understand that will kind of give you an idea about sort of things that they want to do when they want to blow off steam, where they go, how they want to do that. Can be especially helpful if you are playing in a campaign that's got a little bit more downtime in it, and you want to run some more downtime, then now you have things for your character to want to do outside of just like, I'm crafting items, or I'm working a business, or I'm just working a job, in between that sort of stuff. Because adventuring is very dangerous, it's very stressful, you got to have a very good reason to be doing it. Trying to think about what they do in their downtime, and then what's one thing that constantly gets you in trouble. What is some sort of, this is extremely helpful, and definitely something you want to share with your dungeon master or game master. Some sort of quirk, a character trait, some sort of flaw they have, some sort of things like they can't back down from testing a feat of strength, or a classic one's like they won't stand up to anybody talking badly about their friends, disparage their family name. Maybe they're just a bad liar, right? They just can't lie. Like, it's always written on their face, and that's the thing that always gets them in trouble. Maybe they're just trying to be polite, but it always seems like they're lying when they're just trying to be polite. And maybe that's what gets them in trouble, those sorts of things. Maybe they're socially awkward, that gets them in trouble. They could be clumsy, they spill drinks on people, that gets them in trouble. Anything that's just sort of, you figure out something that's like, hey, something that your character just kind of struggles with in their life. There's this constant thing that kind of comes up, and they try to avoid it as much as possible, but does have this tendency to sort of come up that where they flare. It's something that gets them in trouble all the time. They might have some sort of addiction, whether that's drinking or gambling or kleptomania, like for a rogue. Like, they just can't not steal things. Like, they have to steal things. And the great thing is when you can take these two things and put them together, the thing that they do to relieve stress is also the thing that gets them in trouble. It could be like partying. They're a big partier, but can be really troublesome, right? They might spend all their money. They might get too drunk or too high. They have issues with the law. They get into fights, and maybe they're an angry drunk. All that sort of stuff. If you can put those two things together, it's this nice little powder keg of thing that your character can do to spark off some sort of drama or tension in the game, even when nothing's happening. And then sort of down here, do you know one or more party members, and what's your relationship with those people? I feel like a lot of really good game is to be like, okay, this is your character, and then you basically look at somebody else at the table and be like, you decide that you know somebody else at the table. I think Traveler does this very well. Where you choose somebody else at the table and you're like, we have this relationship. Both players have to agree on it. but you choose somebody else and be like, hey, we know each other. Are you cool with that? Yeah, this is how we know each other. Like, I did this thing for you, or you did this thing for me, or we did this thing together. And so that's how we know each other, and we have this history. And like, is that a positive association? Doesn't always have to be. You can be like, we were rivals for a job, and they kind of washed out and didn't go well. That's more of a traveler setup, but you know, we were rivals for a job that washed out, and one or more people got killed because of that. And so you guys know each other, and you have a relationship, but it's not necessarily a good one. So you might be more rivals than friends at that point. And so that can put some tension in the group, but it also gives you a reason to be like, well, whatever this person decides they want to do in whatever situation, I tend to take the opposite side, even if I agree with them, or maybe I begrudgingly agree with them that that's the right thing to do. And now you have that sort of intra-party communication and relationship that starts to build over time, where they're like, oh, well, the more I got to know the other character, the more my character became to respect them and to understand them, and start to realize that the bad blood we had in the past was just a thing that happened, and that's all it has to be. And now we're closer, and you know, you have the rival to friends, or rival to lovers kind of arc of those characters' relationships. So if you sit down at your table and you do that with other party members, you don't always have to do that, right? That's going to be determined on the DM of whether your characters are going to know each other beforehand or not. But it can be very helpful to have at least some of the party kind of already know other members of the party, even if they're not like fast friend blood brothers, just to have them be like, oh, well, I remember this person because we did this thing together, you know, like 2 years ago. It's like, I kind of know them. I mean, I know their name. I haven't spent a lot of time with them, but I know that they're, you know, capable, or whatever background you make for those characters. And then you ask your 6 WH questions, kind of flesh those out if you feel like you still need a little bit more. That's your who, what, when, where, why, and how. If entering is stressful, what's the hobby they do? I don't know. Maybe they play darts. That's what they do. They're a big darts player. How did they get into darts? Okay, when I start to think about my backstory and think about the people who are in that, oh, that's something they picked up when they were apprentice. They worked in a, let's say, like a general store kind of setup, and the guy who ran the general store just wasn't like playing darts and taught me how to play darts, and I came to love it, and now I like to play darts. Now it's not just a thing they do, now it's tied to sort of like their backstory. Now you'd be like, oh, well, this person, you know, who was kind of I was an apprentice, so I was still a relatively young kid, so there's kind of a father figure, sort of, an authority figure in my life, and they took the time to teach me how to do this, and so, you know, when we played darts together, I felt like we had a connection, and now I see playing darts with people as a way to make a connection with that person. And so now when your character invites somebody to play darts with them, it's because they want to get to know them better. And they won't play darts with somebody they don't like, unless they just want to gamble with them and just beat the pants off of them, assuming they're good at darts. They're looking for an invitation to be like, okay, this is a way that I can get some alone time with this person, and we can have a conversation. I can get to learn them a little bit, learn more about them, and know them a little bit better. Right, and that's just a small little smidgen of something you can do with a backstory about a silly hobby that can really blossom into a defining feature of your character if you want it to be. And you can even spin it out. Like I said, they also gamble with it, so maybe that's the one thing that constantly gets you in trouble. If you're, instead of a pool shark, you're a darts shark, you know that darts is an easy way for your character to make some quick cash. Occasionally, somebody's gonna catch you, and they're probably going to start a bar fight with you if they think that you're, you know, sharking them. So then the last thing you do is just, you sort of write it out for your dungeon master. Take all the answers you've gotten and kind of weave them into sort of like probably a chronological kind of narrative. It doesn't have to be super purple prose, well written, it just kind of needs to be functional. Tell the dungeon master, hey, this is my character, this is a little bit about them and sort of their life up to this point, and sort of here's some of the defining people and events in that life, and things that are important to them. Family members, friends, people I worked with, people who have died, things that have happened to me, ways that I've been injured, or other defining moments. You want to keep it short form. You don't want to read, we know as players that we don't want to read some sort of 25-page world primer for a D&D campaign. And that's a two-way street, because just in the same way that your DM doesn't want to read 5 different players' 5-page backstories. That's a lot of work. But at the same time, it's also really difficult as Dungeon Master when you get no background information about a character, because then it feels hard to weave them into the world to make them feel like they are a part of the world. And the last thing I put down here is that you need to try to leave plenty of open room in your backstory for your DM to be able to sort of add and edit elements of your backstory to make sure that the things that are in your backstory fit the campaign world. Because oftentimes as your player, you're making the backstory without that 25-page campaign primer about like everything that's going on in the world. So sometimes you don't have a lot of that information, and so you're like, well, you just kind of put holding stuff in here. You can be like, I grew up in a large city, and you can just kind of. Sometimes I'll just like leave that in brackets. Like, all right, DM, you tell me where a large city is in your game, and that'll be the place I'm from. Oh, and I joined this organization or an adventuring party. I don't know who the adventuring party is, and I don't know who the members of the adventuring party were beforehand, before I became this adventuring party. So I'll leave that up to you. Maybe I'll be like, well, I think there was a fighter in it, and there was probably a rogue in it, and there was probably a wizard in it, and there's probably a cleric in it, or whatever party members you want that you think are going to be important for your backstory. Be like, but I don't want to fully flesh those people out, because I want the DM to be able to have their say in it, as well as be able to surprise me as a player with that information at the table. Be like, hey, you see a big red dragonborn walks into the door, heavily armed and armored. Everybody kind of looks up, but your character specifically knows who this is. You call back and you're like, you know this person. You've adventured with this person before. This is a part of your old adventuring party that disbanded years ago. And this is the first time you've seen them since then. And you're like, oh, all right. Well, that's something totally new for me. And now I know who this character is. And I'm like, all right, do I know their name? Okay. Yeah, write their name down and start taking notes on it and be like, okay, I'm going to have this interaction with this person then. It gives the DM a lot of fodder for not just backstory, hijink stories, like stories that are built off of your backstory, but also as a way to tie your backstory to maybe adventure seeds, adventure things that kind of come from that aspect. I need some way to tell these, to tell the party about the next adventure they're going to go on. Well, let's look at their backstories. We haven't done anything with this character's backstory yet. Let me see what NPCs are in their backstory, and I'll just grab whatever seems like will be the most relatable one for that. Pick them and be like, hey, this is the person who shows up to tell you about the next adventure plot hook. And then for the player character, it feels like that player character is rooted in the world because somebody from their backstory is talking about things that are happening in the world that is, prescient to the adventure that's about to happen, about the goings on of things in the world. Your character feels very grounded in the world. Like, oh yes, this is definitely a place where it makes sense that my character has grown up and lives and functions within this world. Like this feels like this is their home. Like they belong to here, and the things that are in this world are important to them because it is their life. And that's what you're trying to get with these character creation questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those in, answer them as possible. But yeah, that's sort of the questions that I use fleshing out a character when I'm making a character for a new campaign, trying to think about, okay, these are the sort of things they do, this is the sort of things that are important to them, here are the important people in their backstory, here's sort of the life experiences they've had so far, and how all these things influence not only the person that they are, but how they interact with the world and how they view the world at large. Their perception of the reality of the world. And it's extremely helpful. Getting to a place where you feel like you can roleplay this character in any situation and never feel like, I don't know what my character would do here. This will help you get to a point with that character to be like, Alright, I think I understand how this character would react to the situation. This is just a nice little send-off. I just thought it would be a nice thing to do after the news that How to Be a Great GM, that channel is going to be retiring, and this is built off of questions that Guy has put up many years ago, taken that and built it off and twisted some things and changed some things with my own sort of flair. So if you like it, grab it, take it, use it yourself, change it, manipulate it, make it your own. That's it, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you found this enjoyable, and I hope you learned something. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright? Bye-bye.